because I think it's great to have for others to listen in on later. So I want to thank you all in particular. I always thank you for joining, but in particular, selfishly this time, because I could really value your feedback. This I think virtually everybody's been part of a hot seat, but I'll go over the ground rules in a second. But right on, Ben. Right on.
Made me do.
I love how you're pouring it in front of us just to like.
Almost as if I'm taunting you.
Almost are taunting us. I don't think there's an almost to that.
French dessert wine, it seems. I don't know. I thought I was going to put it in a roast chicken, but I ended up drinking it.
Funny how that happens. You bought that by accident instead of cooking wine.
Well, it was the only one that was small, so
makes perfect sense. That means it's better. All right. So in all seriousness, thank you all for joining, because this is sort of somewhat selfish. In wanting to get your feedback on where we take our community, our mortgage jobs community, in the next year. We've been really kind of get going for the past year or so, I guess a little bit longer, but really get going for the past year or so. And in the beginning, it was a lot of experimentation. It wasn't probably until maybe halfway through the year almost that we kind of landed on this community for community builders that seems to have worked out really well. And I'm excited about where we are with it, but recognizing as well that we're still sort of coming out of that experiment mode where we only have a little bit of things going. So this was a cool opportunity to say, all right, let's reflect on that and get everyone's feedback about what they're looking for and how we can take this to the next level. So let me quickly go over ground rules for the hot seat before I kind of pose my problem, since that's sort of my job, and go from there. So I think everybody's been part of a hot seat. Dean, I don't think you have before, but basically how this works is I'm actually in the hot seat this time, but whoever's in the hot seat gets a second to kind of pose their problem, the thing that they're looking for feedback on, and any kind of context they think is sort of relevant for that, for everybody to provide feedback. We're then going to go kind of round robin around the screen here, where each person gets some time for uninterrupted feedback, a few minutes. There is no opportunity for clarification, questions, or back and forth. It is a pure uninterrupted feedback from everyone. If you have clarifying questions, you can throw them out there, but I can't answer. It's not until we go all the way around that then I can kind of ask specific questions or provide specific answers in a one-on-one format. I just sort of call people out and say, Jason, to your point about this, or what do you think about that? I want to build off what you said, kind of thing. When that's through, then it's just sort of kind of open forum for discussion from there. So does anybody not want to participate in the round robin sort of format? Does anybody not want to give feedback, just wants to listen in?
Me, Andrew Babney.
Okay, you just want to listen in, Andrea? Okay.
Yeah.
I am just listening in today as well.
Okay.
Just kind of getting a flavor for all of this.
Okay, well, if halfway through either of you decide you want to change your answer and participate, you're welcome to, once you get a feel for it. So I'll preserve that as an option. Do you need something? Sorry about that. So, all right, here's sort of the background. All right, past year, we did a lot. We've found this really interesting community of ours, and largely have been hosting that, I guess, through events like this, which we've tried to get on a cadence of about one a week, and some through the platform too, largely driven by activity by David and I trying to help stir the pot, but every once in a while somebody else kind of puts in the original content as well. Usually decent comments, at least, out there, but not as much connectivity as I think happens through the events yet. But that's just kind of where we are today. Ultimately, what we're looking for is where do we want to go? So just to really put a finer point on that, what is a community builder? Like, who is the ideal profile of the person that we're looking for? So typically, and this is sort of shared generally by everybody, they are current or former entrepreneurs themselves. These are really people who have kind of been in those seats for the most part. They're very community minded and give first. They tend to practice that type of mentality, just generally in philosophy. They are often involved in particular community activities, so they kind of put their money where their mouth is. A lot of people currently or have run accelerator programs, incubator programs, things with universities. I mean, you name it, volunteer throughout their community and different entrepreneurial events. They are just heavily focused on helping entrepreneurs in their community. Tend to be located in regions outside of a major startup hub, like in New York City or Silicon Valley, where there's an incomplete ecosystem and we face a lot of the same sorts of challenges with institutions and things like that. But they're also not someone, very specifically, we have been trying to exclude, who is just a paid economic development programmer for a chamber of commerce. They're a paid coach or ecosystem builder, as Joe always likes to say, or some sort of professional service provider just trying to leverage the platform for their own business development. We are very clear and pure in wanting to find true startup community builders. So one ask alongside those is, as you think about those profiles, to think about people in your network that you might want to invite in to participate as well. That's one thing I'm looking for. But what am I looking as well in terms of feedback from you? First, what does good growth look like? I think there's value in growing the community as long as we have an unrelenting emphasis on the quality of the individuals. But I'm curious of your perspectives on that more generally. Two, I'm trying to find ways that we can expand the ways the community adds value. Right now, we pretty much do the events in the platform, but are there additional topics? Are there ways that you're looking to connect individually with members, kind of leverage this network we've built out more directly? Are there other types of events we should be doing? Other ways we could be leveraging the platform? And I would just say more open-ended, I'm open to any kind of outside of the box thinking you have about ways that this community can add value. So that's what it comes down to. Referrals that you have in mind. What does good growth look like, and what can we be doing to add value? What are some things that you need help from in this community? So with that, I'll circle around, and you know what, Kelly, you're on my right. I'm going to start with you. That's okay.
All right, thanks. I haven't had a lot of time to noodle on it yet, but the first thing that popped into mind was I don't know all of these individuals in this great community personally. So although we've been connecting on LinkedIn and whatnot, a way to be able to connect with them either through your platform or even just having information, people's information available. So I could then follow up with someone if I liked what they chatted about or had a specific question. I think I've attempted to add individuals or invite individuals in the past to the group. I don't think they've joined yet, but I don't spend a lot of time on the site. So I'm often triggered to come to the site when I see something's been posted and I want to answer it, or if an event has been posted. So I think something else would need to be on the site in order to bring me there regularly. And I'm still figuring out what that something is.
Thank you. That's good. Sorry, I'm just taking notes on everything. Jason, how about you?
Right. Thanks, James. I think that there's two things that pop to mind as you described this. Number one, being at an institution, I love the idea of trying to have something that focuses on extending the network to students who want to be community builders. And so we partner with this group out of Stanford and VentureWell, the University Innovation Fellows. And these are not necessarily the people who are going to be entrepreneurs, but they're people who look specifically to try to influence the ecosystem around entrepreneurship and identify holes in the ecosystem, and then help to essentially, design projects that would maybe fill those holes. And so, just like that targets students who, are want to be community builders, I think there's an opportunity not just to see, the senior entrepreneurs who are doing this, but also target student community builders. The second idea was, a little bit more self-serving, and towards this, some of the things that Brett and I are looking at. I've been thinking a lot about that session, the amount of engagement we had in that session on the research angles. And while I think there are a lot of companies that are collecting data around startups and funding and things like that, I think the data around community is really missing. And so I'm excited to potentially leverage this platform to find ways to reach out to different communities in some type of systematic data collection. And I think we'll present that when we talk about research in sometime in the coming weeks. Thanks.
Point of clarity, Jason, Innovation Fellows, what was it called?
It's University Innovation Fellows. It's a partnership between Stanford University and VentureWell that's been going on, I think, for about 8 years or so. Kelly's been actually through the program.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I got the name. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Doug.
I'd like to echo the student involvement, and I'd also like to echo maybe some sort of membership roster that indicates our particular interests and areas, both conceptually and in geography. I've been enjoying all the events immensely. I keep that going as strong and hard as possible. And I'd also like some way to identify collaborations across different members in this organization. Answering specific problems is great, but what if we align on certain projects, or want to try things as a global community versus a bunch of organizations that are just fragmented. So that's it.
Thanks, Doug. Our wine drinking friend from the UK.
Hi, yeah, thank you. What can immediately trigger me? More people. I feel that this is a tip of the iceberg. There must be many more. I mean, most of you in the United States, I would be very surprised if you couldn't double it just within the United States, let alone Europe, Asia, et cetera, et cetera. So I would like to see a greater breadth of people. I appreciate time zones aren't always helpful in that regard, but I think that would be really interesting. For me personally, selfishly, yeah, I agree with Kelly that chatting on the Mighty Networks thing is okay. It serves its purpose. It's good for alerts, but nothing beats in-person or virtual things like this where we're actually getting to talk to people. And I pick and choose a little bit. I don't go to everything, but these have been the most valuable things. I personally, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm really at the coalface of our startup community. I'm wondering what we should organize. I'm talking to people who might organize them, and I'm dealing with people who sound enthusiastic, but then flake out at the last minute. I want help with existential crisis stuff. And I want to know who I can ask about it. And I want to get immediate practical tips from people who've gone through it or are going through it. And that's more important than anything else. I don't care who I hear it from. And in my experience, people seem to be going through the same things. It made me laugh when both you guys and also historically Brad Fell talked about chambers of commerce. Chambers of commerce seem to be the sort of bad guys. No, they're not bad guys, but those sorts of organizations, everybody seems to have that in common. And to hear that that was just the same everywhere else in the world as it was here in the UK was, I'm not going to say it was heartwarming, it was depressing, but it gave me a sense that, okay, this problem is the same. And I think the problems that we all face probably are largely speaking the same. We're all trying to do the same thing, but I really want coalface stuff. I like the philosophical stuff, and I definitely like having a shoulder to cry on at opportune moments. What I really want is just hard-nosed advice and tips. And somebody looks at my community and says, you're completely missing this part of ecosystem building. You should start doing that event straight away. It will help. That's what I want.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. All right, Mike.
Yeah, so I want to make sure we're on. So you just to be clear, you wanted referrals. What does growth look like essentially? And what was the third one?
I'm breaking a rule in a sense.
Oh, right. I can't answer that. Okay, I feel like I'm in like a drinking game. I like that.
I think you get the picture. I'm not.
Yeah.
worried.
Okay. Forgot. That was trying to get you to break the rule. No, I'm kidding. In hindsight, it would have been a good one. But I have a lot of people come to mind on referrals just because of all the years of trying to do this up here through various. In fact, I'm going to see a bunch of them this afternoon at the Grow New York thing. From the people in Ithaca to people in Rochester to people in Buffalo to people in Albany, and peer community builders, very much in it, just for that reason, and in it way before everyone else was, right? Years ago, at least 15 in some cases, years ago. So I do have people in mind. It would be potentially interesting to bring them into the fold simply because of the problems that they have solved since things have changed since that. So I think they have some pretty interesting stories to tell where, there are definitely budding ecosystems in these various areas right now. What does, sort of as growth looks like? I think you're right to be careful about how it grows. It's not just people. I think there's, growth like this in terms of discussions and value add. I think there's also just raw growth in terms of people visiting and looking at resources and leveraging things such as blog posts. I saw the recommendation for the blog posts and those things. I think that growth matters too, getting eyeballs on it. I do. One is interesting simply because of how siloed they are. But I also think that siloed problem doesn't stop with students. I think people are siloed as well in these various communities. So that's a sort of a root problem that needs to be figured out. Then the last thing I'll say on the research side, and this sort of came to me, I'll just speak of it anecdotally to bring some color to it. But this was, I don't know, maybe last week, I was talking to someone. And to give people context, I'm at a institution now, Lemoyne College, and before that, I was at Syracuse University for like 15 years, and started a startup program there that was outside of the business school, and purposefully so, not because of any animosity, but because everyone thought you needed to be a business major to start a company. So it was purposefully started outside, and we going, launched a lot of companies. One just recently reached unicorn status. Still remember the first day those students were in class and where they were with all that. So it was quite successful and had specific coursework. And last week, speaking to someone, and they said, "Oh yeah, I was in Syracuse. I actually taught this class over there. It was called like, what's the big idea or something?" And
yeah.
And was talking to me, and they had no idea who I was, And I was the person that actually put that entire class together, put that entire curriculum together that was there with a team, of course, and tried to drive that. And you know what dawned on me, and I started to use multiple examples, you know, as I started to piece this together, is that happened, is that a lot of times when it comes to community builders, the people that were actually doing the heavy lifting early days are not even known. People don't even know what they did. They don't even know they existed. And I think that's a good thing to some extent, because something got done that went way beyond them. But at the same time, it sort of gets missed that the system, how much the systems aspect of it and all these different variables that go into the successes of these companies and those ecosystems, that the individuals who potentially got momentum moving from the beginning are just lost in that storyline. Unless they're big self-promoters, which doesn't make them good community builders, right? So, so it's for what it's worth, that anecdote has been sort of in my head, kind of spinning around a little bit, trying to make sense of that. Because I know we've been sort of toying with this notion of how do you make something sustainable, and how do you solidify a community builder type role, or make a solidifying roles like that, is one of the things we've been talking about. And it's kind of interesting that they tend to disappear in history, the ones that were the fire starters.
Thanks, Mike. A lot of comments I want to make, but I'm not going to. Yi Wei, please.
Well, thank you. And I'm not sure what I'm going to say about the community builders. And for me, that the purpose, actually, I saw the first message from David is really regarding how to make the community more productive and with high salaries. And I think this will be very good ideas to draw people in to see what there is the quality of the resource from the community. So, and my personally, I think the real communities really have to be very resourceful. And that's what I think, that I'm very resourceful, and I'm looking for the talents and to know more people, to get social network and to establish the business from the local community. So this kind of a very strong motivation for me started with, and to echo some things going on with this type of events and make it more, attractive or impressive to other people to remember or to coming over again and again. I have no much comment on that, but I just see that I have some very interesting experience in the past. They call the MIT 50K competitions, and they get all big festivals. People come all together from the engineer background, from the commercial background, the MBA from Sloan, and people don't know each other and starting chat, exchange ideas, form up the team just right on site. That's kind of a phenomenal moment. And I know that we could be far away from there, but I think that's kind of a hint which direction we could go, which direction we could establish this kind of branding or marketing effect in place. People say, wow, that will be a lot of intelligence, a lot of resource, a lot of information people can exchange. So, and just to talk about the point, which is really not meaningful, but if you say, okay, I have $5 million want to invest in this area, and that's my reasons, but I could not find people working on that. Or I have so many companies who like to develop some project here and where I can find intelligence. So that's kind of the sense I think we're missing here in terms of resource, make it so clear to everybody come on board. So for me, that, for example, I working all over the place, and a lot of my employee working local. So I have Rhode Island, New Jersey, Florida, California. I really want to find people say, okay, why cannot find from Syracuse? That's why I say, okay, I really try to every chance to know local communities, try to plug into local communities. So then I say, okay, maybe I can bring resource or bring ideas or to share the ideas. So I don't know, maybe I a little bit off the track about the questions from you at the beginning, but that's my first job getting me here. And also the still hopeful for me to keep in place, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So Brett, I know you joined late, but I'll give you the quick and dirty of the question. So one was looking for referrals, people that you think of that are community builders, fit that ideal profile, you think might add value to the community, but also obviously the community would be of value too. Second to that, and along the same lines, is what does good growth look like at this community as we try to grow, membership base and stuff like that. There's always that delicate balance on emphasis of quality of individual and not compromising that, as well as just the level of connectivity in smaller groups compared to larger ones and that kind of thing. And then third, what are ways that this community can expand and add value? So from topics, events, things that you're looking for from other members, connections to members, just sort of open-ended, what are the ways that the community will add value? So I don't know if anything comes to mind, you want to comment on that, but.
Yeah, I know I came late. How's everybody doing? Another meeting I was in ran over. I came in when Mike said he was starting fires, so I didn't know if I was in the right call or not. So good stuff, Mike. I think the only one thing that I'll probably comment on is that second point that you made. And I think it kind of dovetails off the hot seat that we had a couple of weeks ago in regard to the research that Jason and I did for Martin's book. But I devoted more thought and speaking with other communities in that short time or people who are connectors in those communities. But we talked about capacity, burnout, and really that legacy of what's next. How do we sustain what we have, and really what is full capacity in a community looks like? What does that look like? And that's when a lot of discussion happened about meaningful metrics, and are we recognizing that maybe we have hit max capacity in some, where we need to shift gears? And I think there's more communities, or let me rephrase that. I think we're finding more communities, and I think that was what was productive from the hot seat from a couple of weeks ago. Is that what are the best practices, or what we're saying, because there are like communities, and it's not just regional. I think we may have to start looking beyond our region to say, okay, there is that connectivity. And I think that's the exciting part of really what's the next step for growing these communities, is that what's already out there and who are the people that are doing it. Again, all kidding aside, the comment I came in on about Mike starting fires, but Mike made a great point about sometimes the people that are making these connections are the ones who are unknown, or just getting the work done and are driving that change or driving that growth. And I think those are the people I need to start finding each other, as opposed to maybe some of the others in the community finding them. Because again, we use the term best practices all the time. What does that really mean? I think we're going to start seeing some more examples of what worked in other communities could work in ours. And I think that's the real exciting part about, hey, it worked in Portland. That was one of the takeaways from our data discussion and research discussion from a couple of weeks ago. Can that work in Albany? Can that work in Syracuse? Can that work in Asheville? Random time. So, that's the point I want to comment on. I can't really address the other two. I mean, I can, but I think the one that's most important right now are those people finding each other. Maybe that's what this community can very well do, going forward.
Thank you. All right. So, Dean, I don't know if you have any interest in participating. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Doesn't matter. Thumbs down. Andrea, I don't know if you have any further interest in participating. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Thumbs down. Okay, cool. Martin, I know we talk all the time, but I don't know if you want to add some comments too.
A couple of thoughts did come to mind, James. First, thanks for getting on the hot seat here and sharing as you have. And so, yeah, you and I are pretty close to this, and the challenges are things that understand and so want to make progress. I did have a couple of thoughts to add to the target profile, because we talked about things like, hey, who do we want in this community? We've found great success with people that are current or former entrepreneurs, absolutely people that give first, people that are active in some fashion already and doing something for building community, not in a major startup hub, and that are not really participating based on an economic motive. And that made me think a little bit more about, well, what do we mean by that? When we really think about good community builders, they're people that are also intellectually curious. They're ready to speak with and maybe learn from others. That's an attribute. And probably most important, drawing back on even Brad Feld's whole view of startup communities, importance of looking at things through a longer term lens. Now, our really good community builders say, it's not about what I do in the next year. I'm really committed, and it's going to be a long game. I'm playing the long game. I can find some personal reward in doing that, because it's not about putting money in my pocket. But it does put us in that situation where, hey, they're not necessarily looking for public adulation or visibility. And at the same time, we're trying to grow our startup communities. So that's the conundrum. So to do that, besides our goals of, hey, we want to definitely drive more member referrals. How do we get that going? We all know we have to be providing enough value in this community for people to do that. More member produced content, besides the tremendous stuff that both David and James are cranking out. Our ability to crank up more content from members would help. But I think most about, how do we get more member to member interactions? It's one thing for us to talk during a session like this, and we learn a little bit just from hearing dialogue at an event, and that's part of it. But when James and I are looking at our analytics and trying to see where we try to take Mortgage Jobs community in 2022, having an increase in visibility on, and we show member-to-member interaction. Platform, it's one of the reasons we selected the Mighty Networks platform, is that we do get a lot of visibility with analytics through that, but we're probably gonna have to figure out other ways beyond just the interaction through the Mighty Networks app. And as has been noted by several people already, you're on the events, but not necessarily on the app. So if you're talking with other members of the community and getting some value, our ability to see where our member-to-member interactions happening will help us. So we have to figure out how to do that. And finally, I got to thinking about, hey, could we be helping people learn how to become better connectors? Because I've started to realize that good community builders, we're connectors. We have a certain amount of pride in that. That's why we're here. We know we can only build the community when we're active in helping to connect people in the community. Don't really, I'm thinking about what we've done. We haven't put a big spotlight on how do you be an even better connector. There's a little bit of technique, process, platforms. And so maybe an idea to bring that out would be, could we start profiling some of our community builders? Which, by the way, profiling what people are doing that's new and interesting is giving them some visibility, which we want to do. And we got some good examples right here on this session of people that are doing interesting stuff. Ability to profile, attribute or approach community builders have. To be a sharing thing and really help us be better connectors.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, I'm thinking about that last one too. David, you as well. I don't want to leave you out. I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to share.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm not going to go on too much because I feel like a lot of the questions I have are going to be coming from a similar perspective as you, James, and I don't want to steal the next part of the show here. But what I will say is that this has been super valuable for me because I've been thinking a lot about what does good growth look like for more good jobs and how do we grow this community and add value, and how we do that is entirely dependent on what you guys need to get out of it. So just, I've been taking notes and I've got like a page full of notes here, and this has been super helpful to hear from you guys what a community builder can get out of more good jobs and what adding value would look like. And I guess just the one question that I still have is, how do we find other community builders? And Mike, you hit on this. Brett, you hit on it a little bit. So did Martin. How do we find other community builders when they tend to go behind the scenes? Like Mike, what you were saying, how that person that's teaching what's the big idea doesn't know who started that class and wrote the curriculum. And so how do we find community builders when it seems like almost part of being a community builder has that humility aspect to it when they don't want the public visibility? So that's the question I'm still thinking over is, how do we find these people that almost seem like they aren't easily found? Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
All right, so I'm going to go ask some one-on-one questions before I open up the forum. So Kelly, I got a couple for you. So you mentioned a couple things. Other people kind of mentioned similar things, but I'm gonna point them at you too. You talk about ways to connect with people sort of individually, contact information. I think Doug, you also mentioned like a roster kind of thing. So if you go on More Good Jobs, there is an ability to build a profile, which will have your LinkedIn and whatever. You can list your interests. I think we put some larger posts kind of saying, here's how you should fill out your profile out there. It's not a very good search function, I'll be honest with you, but there is an ability to at least comb through the membership list on there. So there is some of that functionality. We did make some attempts to try and put that out there, but I appreciate the fact that that's probably it's not very visible, and clearly people aren't adopting it as much. And at the same time, I also am realistic not to want to force features and things that aren't working on anybody. The goal here is to add value, and we're very kind of upfront about if it's not working, don't do it. So I'm curious from you, like when you are trying to find ways to connect with people, like let's say through LinkedIn, what is it about that usability or whatever that you're looking for? Like walk me through the process of saying, I need to connect with someone with this particular skill set or whatever, help me solve this problem. How would you want to go about searching for that person today, regardless of platform?
I'm kind of in that situation right now. I'm looking for someone with a specialty for a program and haven't been able to find them yet. So going into LinkedIn, doing basic description word search, reaching out to people that I know that are connected in the area, which I have done, asking them if they have any connections or leads. The more I talk about it, the more I realize people have resources or potential connections for me. So I'm just telling more people what I'm doing and what I'm looking for. And they're sending me links. So check this out. Another school is doing this. Maybe you can use their expert. That's kind of where I'm at. So my process.
So follow up, again, being realistic about whether this is something someone would habitually do. Would it be valuable to have a similar sort of search functionality through the platform? Would it be valuable to simply post, I'm looking for somebody? Would it be valuable for me to act almost like a connector to the connectors? What would you actually do? I mean, maybe that's a little too predictive, but.
That's yes to all.
Okay. So make all options available. And maybe we should make a point to highlight some of that better. You also made
maybe a member highlight.
Yeah, that was interesting. So I think Martin, I think you mentioned that like a profile type of deal. We've done that with a few people. We had Rick talk about it. We had Joe, we had Nasser, but we could probably just keep adding others to talk, spotlight themselves.
In a written format. I mean, they wouldn't have to take a hot seat or do something live.
That's where I was going, to actually profile in a way like in an article or a post, so that could also be archived and searchable, ideally. And if we pull out best practices with a theme of identifying best practices, what has this particular community builder done that's innovative or is getting results? That's how we learn, or at least one method of learning.
Okay, and you mentioned another thing along those lines about content, particularly on my blog, that would pull you out there, which I appreciate. But I'm wondering, all right, I'm going to open this up maybe more broadly, but you can answer first, Kelly. If more content related to community building, or is of value for you to share with people in your community, like just sort of relevant content like that, but not specific, like posing questions, which is normally what I post. Would that draw you to the platform, or do you already have spaces that you go to that? Or do you already subscribe to newsletters that help you with that? Or is that actually filling a void?
So my original comment was referencing content that I could share within my community. So it was just entrepreneurship and innovation related content. But I don't have another source of content for community building.
Mm. Cool. What about others? I'm curious if others have opinions on that. I'll open general free-for-all forum.
I wish I had something more constructive beyond any, I mean, it's the signal noise problem here, right? Because you're talking about such nuance that these systems are just not designed to pull that nuance out, right? So search functions and all this other stuff just suck, right? At that, at least right now. And there's potential solutions for that, but that's
beyond the scope.
Yeah,
to say the least.
If this was in your city, if this was in any particular individual city, I think you'd kind of be saying, let's get a bunch of people in a room together and just let them bump into each other, let people sort of filter themselves naturally. And the problem we have is each of us is explicitly in different cities, and that just makes it a lot harder. But this is something that human beings do quite naturally when they're in person. They gossip with each other, and somebody says, oh, you should go and speak to him, he's really good at this. And very quickly people find the person in the room who's most useful to them. And the more often you meet, the more often people signpost and switchboard better. So part of this is just getting to know each other a bit better. I've spoken to a lot of you, but I wouldn't say I know in detail what each of you do and what your really strong skills are. And that's a problem, because I bet you just the people on this call right now could probably triple our activity in Leicester if I spent a good couple of hours with some of you, but I just don't know who to ask, because I don't know who really knows what about what sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think there's another end to that, which is not just knowing about others, but the capacity to pick up on what matters. I mean, anecdotal again, but like yesterday I'm at this Grow New York, and I invited someone to come who was in this a certain area of Grow New York is a local competition here in upstate New York, where it's very much focused on ag tech and agriculture and things like that to support the region for that. So there was one person I invited. There was another person who was another mentor in the program, and I'm a mentor in this Grow New York program and have a team. And there's this other mentor who I don't know much at all. Talked to him within 3 sentences. I said, you need to meet this other person, right? And so made that connection happen. And yesterday we had an incredibly informative, interesting conversation that potentially could end up in potential investment, could potentially end up in potential operator, founder type relationships. There's right. And so it's one, getting to know him, but the other was, within a couple sentences, me just sort of picking up on, need to introduce this guy, right? So I think it's both sides of that makes it a trickier, right? It's the picking up on the signal as much as putting it out there or trying to put it out there.
So if I'm to build on some of that, and then I have a question too I want to pose.
Question, Ben.
I'm cognizant of how that plays out and wanting to make it scalable. So one is more visibility of each other. So between, I can always poke out what's on the platform. I can always continue to encourage you to post on there to try and find those sorts of things. We can do more member sort of speed dating events. We can do more member profile events. We could probably even organize certain aspects of this where each person sort of introduces themselves just to have those like ding moments go on. But I'm also conscious of the fact that as we add more things like that to it, like we're going to do more profiles, we're going to do more speed dating, we're going to do all these different things. There's only so much bandwidth that I have to help organize them. And one of the things that's been on my mind is to make it really more of a community means handing over the reins in an increasing amount to the community. Because if I'm just running the show, it's not as much a community as it is just an event organization platform. I don't know how to make that happen. I'm really curious of other people's feedback of like, how would you want to take over the reins to run an event? I would love to have someone come to me and say, James, I want to run an event through More Good Jobs. And I'd be like, that's freaking amazing. Yes. And I haven't had that yet. And I want more of that because that's where I think, much in the same vein of like community building where you want the community to grow beyond you. I want this community to grow beyond me. And I'd love to be able to make more of that jump in this coming year. I would like some feedback on how to make that happen.
I wonder if the Mighty Networks platform, I don't feel I'm a resident, I'm a visitor. Maybe I just ought to go there more often, but I only hear 9 times out of 10, I go there because you, James, have posted something interesting. I go back there and in a way you're almost feeding that dependency on you by doing it, but I appreciate if no one else posts, then, that's no good either.
I don't want it to die. Yeah, that's my thinking,
I've had exactly the same problem with just our own local community. We tried all sorts of things like Slack and stuff, and it ended up just be me shouting into the void and nothing happening. Actually, what worked well for us was getting people, particularly where they've had something in common, like they've been on an accelerator program, is just boring little WhatsApp groups that require almost no maintenance whatsoever. And if there are some good people within a particular cohort or a group, they naturally chatter away and ask pertinent questions. And I wonder if, I know technology isn't always a solution here, but I do wonder if, again, I don't dislike Mighty Networks, but I feel like I have to go there to do something. Whereas if I got a ping on my phone saying, does anyone know X? Or can you introduce me to Y? And it was on something as immediate as WhatsApp, I'd probably, if I knew the answer, I'd probably reply straight away. Whereas maybe I feel there's some sort of friction with, I don't know. I mean, I've tried to respond to things on Mighty Networks. Yeah, another quickie, and this might be controversial, but Martin, shoot me down if you hate me saying this, but the name obviously was partly because of your book, well, entirely because of your book, but I've always thought the name of your book, it doesn't actually describe what's in it very well at all. Your book is much more about community than the title suggests. And I think that same thing applies to this, the Mighty Network. More Good Jobs could be like an employers federation or something. It could be something about employment. I don't think that's what it is. It's something much more sort of profound than that. And I do wonder if that might be slightly not off-putting, but it's just not immediately obvious what's going on to and somebody hasn't looked at it before.
I noted, Ben, so I appreciate the candor, and believe me, when we thought about building this community, it was certainly leveraging the book. And the goal behind the book was to create more good jobs. It just so happens, as the community has evolved, this online community through Mighty Networks, our ability to help has been greatest in this idea of community builders. So you might say we've kind of taken it in a direction that wasn't originally anticipated, but it was only by looking at the data and seeing who's showing up, who's interacting, what's the value they find. You are absolutely right. This whole notion of community builders seems to be where we've had the greatest traction. So is it a miscast name of the group? It's worthwhile to say, all right, should we just call it something else? All right, startup community builders, all right? And take the same stuff and, just take it out of more good job.
You deserve all credit and more book sales if that's what you get out of having it named after your book, because your book is brilliant. But I think both this and frankly your book is not about creating jobs. Obviously that's a result of what community builders do, but that's not why we do it. I don't think any of us around this thing I don't think our main motivation is to create jobs. It's just a great thing that happens if we are successful. We're creating communities, so there's something more to it than that. I think there's something more profound than just creating jobs. Anyone can create jobs. We create very good jobs, but we don't call it that. None of us call it creating jobs. If I said I was to my local council, I'm a job creation person, they would think I was a completely different sort of person to what I really am. And I suspect that's a universal thing. So if being frank about it, what you did creating this community is something Brad Feld should have done in 2012. And he didn't for whatever reason. And that's his loss. But what he says he is, in his book, is clearer to me. So if he'd done it 2012, oh God, I wish he had. Never mind. Best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. So here we are.
Right. Good feedback.
Yeah, it is. So on the platform too, one of the things I definitely don't discount, although the platform has a lot of clunkiness, just generally I've heard that about any Mighty Networks, is that it doesn't have the same level of stickiness that some other things have had. To Martin's point, the analytics have been helpful. So while like when I post something, it does seem like it's just me sort of shouting into the ether sometimes, but I can go back and I'll look and it's like, holy crap, like I didn't realize a third of the community clicked on that post to read more. Like that was, that happens more often than you might think. Even if nobody responds or even likes it, I'm shocked at how many people read it. So I have been posting, I've had that sort of mixed feeling about it too, is am I kind of creating my own worst enemy by creating that cycle? But at the same time, realize the data is showing at least people are reading it. So I'd rather kind of erred on the side of saying, let me at least have more activity on there and maybe somebody also feel a little bit more comfortable posting themselves if there's something on there and not the only person making content. So, but I'd also don't want to just randomly push a platform just for the sake of pushing a platform. And so, to that point of like, let's say WhatsApp or Slack or some of the other things that are on there, because inherently we have to use technology to build this community by the very nature of its geographic sort of, I don't know how dispersed it is. I don't know if I'd have a sort of a concern, but like, the community sort of forms around that platform in these events right now. And I'm wondering if we add technology, do you feel like another, area, is that going to create more confusion about how to engage, or is that going to add value in the ability to engage? And that's to everybody, but I know Ben kind of brought up the point. Maybe I'm a little old school in thinking that way, but I'm just.
I don't think that gets towards a solution to what you're trying to solve. A tool throwing different tools at it. I mean, they all basically do similar things, right? At this point, one-to-many, one-to-one, whatever. They allow for those types of communication, defining channels, like you name it. Clear could even work. Goodness sakes, right? If we wanted it.
Sure. Yeah.
So, one thought that comes to mind that I think gets overlooked as we talk about connections and I don't want to get too deep into it, but for sure. But when you start talking, you can talk about, there's three things that I think get convoluted in these discussions. One is community, the second is networks, and the third is problems. Those are three very different things and three very different human organizing principles. People organize within communities of practice for the sake of learning. That's the motivation of the community. That's why they engage. People network with each other for different reasons, but primarily there's exchange going on in some way, right? There's a need, there's a connection, it's sustained for some reason. That's just network analysis, structural wholes. There's a whole bunch of different stuff you could add to that. The third is problem. And problems are what people really organize around, which is what we're doing today. That's what this is, right? We just did it. We're exhibiting that. And that's potentially a critical part to, on the community building part, is not necessarily connecting dots in a network, not necessarily inviting people in, even to a community of practice like we're trying to do, but to get people engaged in solving problems. And your role, I think, as facilitator, as any leader, good leaders do this well, they structure the problem in such a way to create the engagement. People come in and start collaborating to solve that problem together, right? They share the problem in some way. So I'm just putting that out there because these tools are just that, right?
Makes sense.
If you get a bunch of people organizing around a problem and they need to solve it, they'll use whatever they need to, they'll use email, for goodness. It just doesn't matter, or the phone, or they'll get on a plane if they're so motivated to do that, right? So I just think we need to be careful as we start moving towards trying to solve it. There's potentially ways of becoming a little bit more sophisticated about organizing, where we could say, what are the problems trying to be solved that are being solved here? What are those? And those potentially start to become organizing principles for communities and networks. Those are both byproducts of that, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's helpful, but it's just.
No, I think so. If I'm kind of to reiterate, and I want to see some either head nods or shakes. You're saying essentially forget about random tools to promote engagement, but simply creating more opportunity to highlight and coalesce around problems. And so if that becomes a central focus of everything, from an event to a post to a blog to
Correct.
whatever it is you're doing, as long as at the center of it is a particular problem. And in this case, I think what we've tapped into is the more nuanced sometimes the better, because it's very relevant to a community builder. As long as you have that sort of, pure focus, that's what matters. That's the signal, to use your terms.
Yeah.
This reminds me of our local startup community, but before we started running accelerators. So we had meetups, we had interactions. Sometimes we'd have an amazing speaker and everyone would be buzzing, and you could see there were little sort of explosions of interest and people learning things, but it was very piecemeal. And then we ran an accelerator and everything changed. Suddenly we got our hands dirty in a way we'd never done before. I sort of half jokingly posted in the chat that there needs to be an accelerator for startup communities. Now, I'm not saying the accelerator model is at all appropriate for that. I don't know, I haven't really thought it through, but something where we go beyond casual interactions and just chatting to each other to something a bit deeper than that feels like would be my next move. And I would, if I couldn't think of anything else, yes, I would be calling it an accelerator. I want deep and not perpetual, but long-term scrutiny of what I'm doing in Leicester, because I believe any of you could probably help me. And if all of you could help me, because we're meeting regularly over a period of time, I think that would be absolutely life-changing. And I really need that right now. I need somebody to question what I'm doing because they've done it better than me, and I'm not getting that. If I have got an issue, then I'll probably track some of you down, and I've done that. But some of the problems I've got, I don't know I've got them. I don't realize what I'm doing wrong. So I don't know where to start, and I need that scrutiny from other people. And that's absolutely what Michael said about going after the problems in a proper way. I think that's exactly it. And I think some sort of mechanism that maybe looks a bit like an accelerator or something a bit more hard-nosed is exactly it.
So in that role, what that does is it crystallizes problems, right? And people will spend a lot of time talking about what the heck are we doing? What is the problem? They're essentially saying that as they go through conversations. And then once that gets solidified, you start to get collaboration and action and the solutions to those problems. But sometimes the problems are so nuanced that everyone has a different perception of what it is they're trying to solve. So they're not collectively solving anything, right? They're not collectively solving the same thing.
So maybe, to add that, I know we're running over, but take some inspiration from some of the components, or at least the intention of an accelerator. But what I want to be careful of is any of the formality of such a program, because I think where a lot of communities, like taking Brad's community, taking less so Brad's as much as Kaufman and Startup Community Way, not Startup Community Way, was it Startup Champions Network? They started to kind of formalize some stuff a little too much, to where people like us were like, yeah, that's BS, I'm out of here, I'm gonna go to the bar, in literal sense, like Joe did, or Ben did, I guess in this case. But and I want to avoid that, because that's just, I'm not looking to play puppeteer or find more grant funding. We want genuine community, pure and simple. So you got me thinking about how can we be putting together more activity, broadly speaking, that stirs the pot, maybe even kind of forces you into that mindset, rather than even just creating the opportunity for you to pose a problem, but like force you into that conversation almost a bit. A kick in the ass that accelerator is going to give you. Well, not the formality.
Accelerate the verb, not accelerator the noun. Yeah, just if you can accelerate people, then all good.
Yeah, this chat is awesome. I'm definitely saving the chat because there's just a lot to digest even there.
And we
Just
have
one
to
quick
invite,
comment.
we have to invite Ben to do a hot seat to share his problem, and we can help.
I think I've already had my time, but
oh, you have plenty more. Don't worry.
Okay.
Look, if there's one lesson I'm gaining from this, is every time somebody else is doing a hot seat, everybody on the call is like, "This was awesome." That's what I get. I get emails. This was awesome. I love it. This is great. I want to do more of that, even if they're not the one in it. So, I'm sorry, Jason. Go. You had one comment you want to make too.
I was just saying, with the Startup Tech Valley event that we ran, eventually it seemed to be just us pushing things. And what one strategy that worked is we looked to have themed events where we partnered with like Troy Innovation Garage or Fuse Hub, or we tried a Veterans Network, and we kind of just said, hey, you're in charge, figure it out, use this framework. And if you want to run something under this brand, then can kind of go for it. And it worked for a while, and it took a little bit of the lift off us of continually recruiting companies and things like that. And it just might be something to think about, of just asking us, not just to do an event, but maybe to organize a series event. It's just the ask gets a little bit larger of like, is there things that, we could do in academia versus others that, just open the platform to suggest people not just do an event, but maybe run a couple of events.
So is that something like, well, let me ask around. Is that something you would be open to? Is like if I tasked you and said, hey, would you just this one series of events, would you be willing to help organize and host that? I mean, to you, Jason, would that be something you would be open to?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to talk about it and figure it out, but like maybe in collaboration with Brett and some of the things that we're doing, it's not much different than what we've started.
It was a recurring theme of interest, so that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's about getting those themes of people. What is the subcategory of theme that we're tackling versus other people are tackling, and trying to kind of identify those people who might have an interest in kind of pushing a certain subtopic forward.
I bet you putting together a curriculum of the killer topics wouldn't be a particularly difficult thing to do. Who said it? Was it Martin or Michael about how to connect? You know, there's a workshop. There you are straight away. That's one really important workshop you do at the beginning of your accelerator or whatever you call it. I bet you could find 10 key activities. What about data collection on, you know, founders, investor relations, university relations, etc. You could probably come up, I bet between us within an hour-long brainstorm, we could come up with a curriculum of the killer things that every startup community organizer needs to be thinking about. And then it gets a lot easier finding people who could do a talk on it or host something. They'd be volunteering if you asked them.
I do have to run too, so thanks, guys.
Yeah, no, this is great. I think everybody probably has to. I'll post the recording. It gave me a lot to digest. It'll be a recurring topic. I'll point to people, but we'll probably even use the platform to just throw out some other topics if you want to give some feedback. But all right, thank you, everybody.
Hey, James, one quick thought before you head out.
Yeah.
Quick observation. Working within the universities, right? One of the battles is always the universities really don't understand startups or entrepreneurship, and the primary culture is counter that, honestly. I'm wondering, I question whether it stops there, if that's just a university college problem, specifically in the smaller communities, that it's a similar problem being solved. Because the primary mindset is not of entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
So we might be in some, when we isolate it within a university, everyone head nods and said yes, like we get that, and totally. I'm wondering how different that is outside the university within communities, within these same communities, right? The prevailing mindset. What's that?
I've got to go, but I would just completely echo what you say. Universities have their role, but just be careful. They're not necessarily the right people to be running things. Good venues, conveners, and collectors of human beings, but they don't know anything about this, largely speaking, unless it's Stanford. You know.
Well, that's right. So there's exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
But then, I guess my point is that I'm wondering if in these communities it stops at the universities borders. It doesn't. It goes beyond the university's borders. It's endemic to the community, right? And so it's a similar. So what's the point? Potentially meaning the community building. That maybe community building. We're talking about these community builders as being a little bit more humble. Back on the back end of things and being a little quieter about it. Maybe they can't be. Maybe they need to be a little bit more out. And, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's just a thought, because you're promoting a mindset in the end, right? Which is really freaking hard, because you're telling a story to a population of people and hoping to buy into it.
See,
that's not easy.
I'm kind of glad I stayed on, Mike. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think we've talked about this, and I know I'm speaking with other people about it, where I think it's almost this is what I see in two of the upstate communities, which I work with academia. It's you take the lead on that, and then boom, it stops. And when you start making that connection between the university, I think Ben just hopped off, and the community at large, it's that mindset. It's the entrepreneurial mindset. Where does that? Why can't that spill over across this imaginary border? Because they need to work with one another. And I saw it when I was in Connecticut also, where you had a really strong education economy, where you'd hope it would spill over. And the only place I saw that really did it well, I think, was New Haven, because Yale started embracing the entrepreneurial mindset a little more. And the fact that it owns about 70% of New Haven, it's a lot easier. But that's another story for another time.
All right. Well, this is good, guys. I don't want to take too much of everyone's time. I may even end up following up individually with folks or creating a second forum. It doesn't stop here. I want to start working on some of this at the end of the year, but Yeah, I appreciate all the feedback. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Cool. This is awesome.